Hello everyone. So the topic our group chose was behaviorism and social learning theory. What both of these learning theories do is that they emphasize how we interact with our environment in an observable manner. We learn by taking in stimuli given off by the environment and performing actions that have been taught to us within that environment in some way, shape, or form. So what exactly is behaviorism? So behaviorism has a lot of roots in classical conditioning, and asserts that only directly observable events are worthy of being recorded. It also indicates that most of our emotional reactions, save for three, stem from our conditioned behaviors. The little Albert experiment, which we will get into in a moment, will explain how this process occurs. Behaviorism was developed by an American psychologist named John Watson. He got his inspiration from the very famous classical conditioning experiment conducted by Ivan Pavlov, in which he was able to get his dogs to salivate at the simple sound of a bell. Watson determined that the only observable behaviors had any value to research and study. Watson and his wife, Rosalie Rayner, who was in fact his student before marrying him, wanted to observe behavior in humans rather than dogs, so they conducted what is known as the Little Albert experiment. In this experiment, a very young child of 9 months old named Albert was introduced to a white rat. At first, Albert showed no signs of fear while in the presence of the rat. However, Watson would make a loud noise by banging a hammer on a pipe to scare the child. Eventually, after a number of trials, Albert would start crying the moment he saw the rat because he had associated it with the loud noise. A conditioned response was also present when shown other toys such as a fox, a bunny, Santa, and, almost poetically, Watson himself. This response was conditioned into the child, which proves the previous point about our emotional reactions being heavily influenced by our conditioned behaviors. So now we get into social learning theory. This theory emphasizes not only through observing stimuli in our environment, but learning how to execute specific actions by mimicking others. An immensely important aspect of this theory is called reciprocal determinism. This is the idea that an individual, their environment, and behaviors all influence each other, and should all be taken into consideration when researching and/or studying how we learn. Social learning theory was developed by a Canadian-born psychologist named Albert Bandura. Bandura got his inspiration from a handful of other psychologists. First and foremost was Richard Walters, who discovered in his studies on familial aggression that parental modeling was a catalyst for aggression surfacing throughout the rest of the family. He was also heavily influenced by Dory Ross, Sheila Ross, and Ted Rosenthal. In their research, they had defined the laws of modeling quite a bit, and debunked a number of common misconceptions made about modeling in general. There are 4 conditions that are necessary for effective modeling to take place. The first one is attention. Various factors can affect our attentiveness. This includes the relevance, complexity, distinctiveness, and functional value of the subject material. The characteristics of the student also affect attention. What kind of past reinforcement do they have? Their sensory capacities and arousal level both affect their attention. Retention is the second condition necessary for effective modeling. Do they remember what they paid attention to? This includes symbolic coding, mental images, cognitive organization, symbolic rehearsal, and motor rehearsal. The third condition is reproduction, reproducing said image. This includes their physical capacities to imitate their model and self-observation of reproduction. The last condition needed for effective modeling to take place is motivation. Does the student or learner have a good reason to imitate? Do they have incentives? Has their imitation in the past been rewarded? Are they able to recall the reinforced model? As both social learning theory and behaviorism insist that our behaviors are heavily affected by the environment, It is imperative that students have positive experiences in school. Negative experiences lead to negatively modeled behavior in social learning theory, and negatively conditioned responses according to behaviorism. Reinforcement of behaviors creates patterns, positive or negative. By positively reinforcing positive behaviors, and negatively or neutrally reinforcing negative behaviors, patterns of behavior can be adjusted over time. Social learning theory and behaviorism are constantly demonstrated in the music classroom. Both teachers and students are constantly acting as modeling musical behaviors as they perform. Students are constantly observing their peers and the instructor as they develop proficiency on their instruments or voice. Modeling and repetition is most apparent in rote learning, or when an example is played for comparison, but is also happening as one student makes a mistake and looks to their peer for help. Social learning and behaviorism are so common in the music classroom because they are a result of constant observation. So, what do we need to ask ourselves after absorbing all of this information? A common theme that should surface in our questions should be in regards to conditioned behaviors that either help or hurt a student's ability to learn, and how we as teachers can either aid them in breaking bad habits or help condition them to establish good ones. For example, let's say we have a student who is doing a vocal audition, but moves around too much while singing. We first need to determine what conditioned them to move so much while they're performing. Maybe they have a background in dance performance. And then we need to model proper technique by showing them how to align themselves and remain grounded while singing. This can be applied to a number of scenarios, and it's good to keep in the backs of our minds as teachers when we come across a student who wants to get past a negatively conditioned behavior. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed.